For thousands of years, humanity has been haunted by one question. A question that divided believers and scientists, caused wars and split churches. Who wrote the most read book in history? Who created the text that changed the lives of billions of people around the world? The Bible is read in every language, entire nations live by it, and bloody wars have been fought because of it. But until now, no one truly knew who its author was. The church said it was Moses, guided by the will of God. Scientists doubted that, but they couldn't prove otherwise. Then in 2025, something impossible happened. For the first time in history, artificial intelligence gave a clear answer to this question, and the truth was not what anyone expected. What did the computer find after studying every word of the ancient text? Who actually wrote the holy lines? And why did this mysterious person hide their identities for 3,000 years? Today we'll tell you a story that will change everything you thought you knew about the Bible. Imagine you're reading a novel and suddenly realize something feels wrong. In the first chapter, the author uses one name for God, and in the third, a completely different one. The story of the flood is told twice, but with different words. In one place it says Noah brought 2 of each animal onto the ark, and in another, 7 pairs. Here's something even stranger. In one chapter, it says that God created man last after the animals. But in another, it says man was created first and then animals were made for him. How is this possible in the same book? These kinds of strange details have puzzled scholars for centuries while reading the Bible. Why is God called Yahweh in some chapters and Elohim in others? Why does the style of some chapters feel like a dry legal document, while others sound like a storyteller speaking by the fire? Why is the same commandment written differently in different books? 200 years ago, bold researchers came up with a shocking idea. What if the Bible wasn't written by one person? What if the holy text is actually a collection of works by different authors? This revolutionary theory became known as the documentary hypothesis. Supporters of this idea believed they could find signs of 4 separate sources, which they labeled with letters J, E, D, and P. But how could they prove it? How do you tell one ancient writer from another if their names were lost long ago? Traditional methods reached their limit. Scholars argued, created theories, but had no solid proof. A breakthrough was needed, and it came from the last place anyone expected, an artificial intelligence lab. But before we talk about that breakthrough, meet the woman who changed everything. At Duke University, a mathematician named Shira Feigenbaum-Golovin was working. She's not only passionate about numbers, she's fascinated by ancient mysteries. In 2010, she met the archaeologist Israel Finkelstein, and they started an unusual project. At first, they weren't studying the Bible. They were looking at pieces of ancient pottery with writing on them. Imagine, you find a fragment of a clay jar in the desert with just a few Hebrew letters. How can you tell when and by whom it was written? Feigenbaum-Golovin taught a computer to analyze the shape of the letters, their angle, line thickness, and style. The machine became better at dating these inscriptions than any expert. If a computer can recognize handwriting on pottery, Shira thought, why couldn't it learn to tell different writing styles apart in the Bible itself? The idea was bold. No one had ever tried to feed a holy text to artificial intelligence before. Feigenbaum-Golovin built a dream team. Mathematicians, archaeologists, physicists, theologians, and computer scientists from Israel, the USA, and France. They were united by one goal: to uncover a mystery that had troubled humanity for thousands of years. But how do you make a machine sense an ancient writer's style? Now pay attention. Here's how the computer learned to read the minds of ancient scribes. Normal text analysis programs didn't work here. The Bible isn't a modern book with millions of words. It's made up of short, heavily edited fragments that were copied many times. In this setting, standard algorithms just go blind. So the team created a completely new approach. Instead of using machine learning, they used frequency analysis. What does that mean in simple words? Imagine every person has their own speech habits. One often says, you know, another uses basically, and a third always says, to be honest. In the same way, ancient writers had their favorite words and expressions. The computer counted how often thousands of different words appeared in various chapters of the Bible. Not just important ones like God, people, or law, but also the simplest ones: no, which king. It turned out even basic words were used differently by each author. But the most important thing, the machine didn't just give a result, it explained why it made each decision. This chapter belongs to the first author because it contains the word gold too often, and the phrase, "and it was good." Or, this was written by the second author. He loves to repeat, "Hear, O Israel," and uses the word curse. To test the system, the scientists selected 50 chapters whose authorship had already been roughly suggested by biblical scholars. The computer had to sort them by author, blindly without being told. The result shocked everyone. 84%. The machine correctly guessed the author in 84 out of 100 cases. That's an incredible level of accuracy for such a difficult task. But do you know what amazed the scientists even more? The AI found that some chapters of the Bible were written by people who lived 400 years apart. Imagine, it's as if the same novel was written at different times by Shakespeare, Dickens, and Stephen King. But the biggest discovery was yet to come. The AI clearly divided the Bible's text into 3 separate groups, 3 completely different writing styles, 3 literary fingerprints. This meant 3 different authors, or at least 3 distinct groups of writers. But that's not even the most surprising part. The AI also found that each of the 3 authors imagined God in a completely different way. One described him as a distant and majestic ruler who speaks through rituals and laws. Another saw him as a close friend, someone who could get angry or joyful. The third author viewed God as a strict judge of history, one who rewards and punishes nations. And here's what shocked the researchers most of all. The differences weren't just in theological ideas or big religious words. Even the simplest words, like no, which, king, were used differently by each group. Out of the 1,447 unique terms analyzed by the computer, each author had their own special vocabulary. The first style was strict, formal, and full of technical terms. Words like tabernacle, gold, ark, cubit, and board appeared over and over. This was the language of priests, people who knew temple rituals in great detail. The second style sounded like a passionate sermon. Hear, O Israel, if you obey, you will live. If you disobey, you will be cursed. This was the voice of a reformer, someone who wanted to change the world through religion. The third style felt like a chronicle, a calm narrative about kings, wars, victories, and defeats. The author clearly knew history well and knew how to tell it. But who were these people behind the styles? The computer could detect their handwriting, but it couldn't name them. Still, the scientists managed to create surprisingly accurate portraits of the ones who may have written the most important book in human history. Meet the man who most likely created the laws and rituals of the Bible. The first author was probably a man named Eleazar. That name means God has helped. Very fitting for someone who wrote sacred texts. Eleazar was about 60 years old and had lived a hard life. He was born in Jerusalem, into a family of temple servants. From childhood, he studied the Holy Scrolls, memorized every ritual, and learned to read and write. A rare skill in those days. Eleazar could have become one of the most powerful priests of his time, but disaster changed his fate. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem. The temple was destroyed. The priests were either killed or taken captive. Eleazar ended up in Babylon, a foreign land surrounded by foreign gods. Everything he believed in lay in ruins. But in exile, Eleazar found his true mission. If the Jewish people wanted to survive, they didn't need the stones of the temple. They needed unbreakable laws, rules that couldn't be burned or destroyed, laws written in words. Eleazar sat in his house in Babylon by the light of an oil lamp. A papyrus lay in front of him. He wrote slowly, carefully, choosing every word. And the Lord said to Moses, and he brought the offering, and it was good. The phrase, "and it was good," became his signature. The AI found it again and again in his writings. Sometimes Eleazar would pause, put down his pen, and stare out the window at the foreign city. Somewhere out there, hundreds of kilometers away, lay the ruins of his beloved temple. He would never again see the sacred fire or hear the Levites sing. But he could do something else. He could preserve the memory of what was holy. Eleazar described the layout of the temple in the finest detail. How many cubits long, how many wide, what kind of gold, what kind of rings, what kind of curtains. People who had never seen the Jerusalem temple had to be able to imagine it in all its glory. And one day, when the exile ended, build it exactly the same again. Eleazar most likely died in Babylon, never seeing the temple rebuilt, but his words lived on through the centuries. Now meet the man who may have written the most famous covenant in history. The second author lived even earlier. In the 7th century BCE, during the great reforms of King Josiah, his name was probably Shaul, which means asked from God. He was about 35 years old, a royal scribe, an educated and influential man. Shaul lived in a time of major changes. King Josiah decided to cleanse the religion of foreign influences. Pagan altars were destroyed, foreign gods were removed, and the entire nation was commanded to worship only one God, in one place, the temple in Jerusalem. Imagine the situation. Surrounding Judah were mighty empires, Assyria, Babylon, Egypt. A small nation could only survive if it truly became united. And to do that, it needed one faith, one temple, and one law. Shaul wasn't just writing religious texts. He was building the ideology that could help a nation survive. Shaul understood that his people stood on the edge of extinction. Whole civilizations were vanishing around them. The Hittites, the Philistines, the Canaanites. Only a single shared belief could protect the Jews from the same fate. But how do you make people change their way of life? How do you convince them to let go of old habits? They needed a strong belief system, and Shaul became its creator. He wasn't writing history, he was writing a manifesto. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. These words were meant to sound like a battle cry. Shaul didn't just talk about laws, he warned and promised. If you obey, you will live in a good land for a long time. If you disobey, you will be cursed. Shaul likely wrote at night after royal council meetings. A candle burned, his pen scratched across papyrus. He weighed every word like a jeweler weighing gold. His goal was not to entertain, but to change people's hearts. The AI found special word markers in Shaul's texts. Vow, curse, if you, so that you may live. This was the language of a covenant, a strict, unbreakable deal between God and his people. Shaul believed that only complete loyalty to one God could save his people from destruction. History proved he was right. Nations that worshiped many gods disappeared, but the Jews united and survived. And finally, the ancient chronicler, the voice who passed on the story of an entire people. The third author came later, possibly after Jerusalem had already fallen. Let's call him Avner, father of light. He was a wise man, a historian, someone who knew his people's past very well. Avner had a different mission. Eleazar restored the laws. Shaul created the ideology. But what about history? How do you explain why a people chosen by God had suffered such terrible defeats? Why did Jerusalem fall? Why was the temple destroyed? Avner saw how his people were losing their faith. Where is God? They asked after Jerusalem's destruction, and Avner decided to answer them through history. God hasn't gone anywhere. We just don't always understand his plans. Avner began writing a historical chronicle. He told stories about kings, both good and bad, how some rulers obeyed God and won, while others broke his laws and were defeated. This was history with a message. Avner most likely had access to royal records. He knew names, dates, details of battles. But he didn't care only about facts. He cared about reasons. Why did some kings rule long and peacefully, while others died young? The AI found something amazing. Avner's writing style was very similar to Shaul's. That wasn't a coincidence. They belonged to the same school, the same tradition, but there was a key difference. Shaul wrote about laws. Avner wrote about events. Shaul warned of future punishment. Avner explained past suffering. Avner probably worked with students. He would dictate and they would write. Sometimes different students recorded his words in slightly different ways. That's why the AI sometimes confused his text with Shaul's. But the overall style was usually clear and recognizable. However, the most incredible discovery was still ahead. What the AI found next made even the most skeptical scientists believe in the power of modern technology. The machine analyzed the famous Ark story, the tale of how the sacred Ark of the Covenant was captured by enemies and later returned. This story is told in two books of the Bible, the first book of Samuel and the second book of Samuel. Scholars had always believed that the same author wrote both parts. After all, it's one story, one plot. But the AI saw something that people had missed for 2,000 years. The first part of the story was written in a completely different way than the second. Different words, different expressions, a different rhythm. The first book of Samuel didn't match any of the three known writing styles, but the second book clearly belonged to Avner. What did this mean? That even a single story could be told by different people. The first author likely wrote down an old folktale, and later Avner rewrote it, giving it new meaning. This discovery shocked Bible scholars. It turned out that the Bible wasn't just a collection of texts by different authors. It was a multi-layered creation, where some stories were built on top of others, where one writer rewrote another, added to it, changed it, interpreted it in his own way. Do you know what this means in practice? It means that whenever we read any story in the Bible, we're hearing several voices at once. The ancient storyteller who first recorded a tale, the editor who reworked it, the scribe who added his own details. The Bible is not a monologue. It's a dialogue across the centuries. Imagine if thousands of years from now, people from another civilization found fragments of our writings, Shakespeare's works, modern novels, newspaper articles, social media posts, and tried to figure out who we were. That's exactly what happened with the Bible. Only in reverse, but that was only the beginning. The AI analyzed other controversial texts and made even more shocking discoveries. The Book of Esther turned out to have been written by someone completely different. It didn't match any of the three main authors. Some stories about Abraham also stood apart. And do you know what that means? The Bible had three main authors, the same Eleazar, Shaul, and Avner. But beyond them, dozens of other people helped shape the sacred book. Scribes who added their own notes, editors who inserted clarifications, scholars who expanded old stories with new details. So the Bible wasn't just the work of three men, it was the shared creation of entire generations. The foundation was laid by three great writers, and then hundreds of people over centuries added their own lines, shaping the book we know today. The AI helped make another amazing discovery. The Bible wasn't written over a few years, but over centuries. Generations of scribes, priests, scholars, and royal officials added to it. Some recorded ancient legends, others wrote new laws. Some rewrote older texts, giving them new meaning. Eleazar, Shaul, Avner. Of course, these are symbolic names. We'll probably never know their real names. But thanks to AI, we've now clearly seen their faces, heard their voices, understood their goals. Eleazar wanted to preserve faith in exile. Shaul wanted to reform religion. Avner wanted to explain history. They all worked on one book, but each had his own mission. And then something happened. The results of the study sent shockwaves through the academic world. For the first time ever, the idea of multiple authors of the Bible received solid scientific proof. Not just theories or guesses, but hard numbers, statistics, and mathematical evidence. An 84% accuracy rate in identifying the correct author. That's more than many modern AI systems achieve. The AI didn't just say who wrote what, it explained how it knew. But the most surprising part, the algorithm even worked with the shortest passages. Sometimes just a few sentences were enough to identify the author. The machine detected tiny details that no human had noticed. Conservative believers reacted with skepticism. How can a machine judge a sacred text, they asked. But liberal theologians saw it as confirmation that the Bible is a living book, one that grew and evolved with its people. Atheists celebrated, see? No divine inspiration, just a human book. But many believers confidently replied, does that make the Bible less holy? Can't God speak through different people? Here's what Professor Thomas Römer, one of the researchers, said. For the first time, we heard how the Bible was written, not by one inspired author in a few years, but by an entire people over centuries. And that makes it not less sacred, but more human. But the importance of this discovery went far beyond religious debates. Feigenbaum Golovin and her team had created a revolutionary tool that could be applied to any ancient text. The Dead Sea Scrolls, mysterious manuscripts found in the desert. Who wrote them? When? AI has already begun to answer those questions. Early results show some of the scrolls were written by the same people who wrote parts of the Bible. Disputed letters from historical figures, Lincoln, Napoleon, Peter the Great. Are they forgeries or authentic? Very soon the machine will be able to determine the truth. Ancient chronicles with unknown authors, anonymous manuscripts, texts attributed to great writers but questioned by scholars. We've basically created a time machine, says Shira Feigenbaum Golovin. It can't take us into the past, but it can hear the voices of people who died thousands of years ago. It can distinguish between them, understand who said what and why. And this is only the beginning. The team already plans to apply their technology to ancient Greek texts, Latin chronicles, even Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. We may soon find out whether those great poems were truly written by a single person. The study brought closure to a debate that had lasted 2 centuries. The Bible really was written by different people at different times. The documentary hypothesis turned out to be true, at least in its core claim. But this discovery led to new, even more intriguing questions. Who was the brilliant editor who managed to weave together texts from different authors into one continuous narrative? How did he turn scattered fragments into a coherent book that reads like a unified work? And the biggest question, what does this mean for how we understand the Bible? Does multiple authorship make it less authoritative? Or does it actually show that this sacred text is not the voice of one man, but of an entire people? Maybe that's the secret to the Bible's incredible power. It combines the wisdom of a priest, the passion of a reformer, the knowledge of a historian, and the faith of ordinary people. Eleazar, Shaul, Abner, and many others whose names were lost to time created a book that speaks to everyone in their own language. AI helped us look into the past and see these people. They were different, in age, in character, in purpose. But they shared one thing, a desire to pass down what they believed was most important. And now, 3,000 years later, we have finally heard their voices, and we understand. The Bible is not just a book. It is a chorus of human souls singing about God, about life, about the meaning of existence. And that chorus is still singing. What's next? Feigenbaum Golovin's team is already working with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and what they're finding there may completely change our understanding of early Christianity. Imagine, it's possible that some of the mysterious authors of these scrolls personally knew Jesus Christ. AI has already found traces of several different writing styles in the Qumran scrolls. One of them is remarkably similar to the style of certain psalms. A coincidence? Or have we found the hand of someone who contributed both to the Bible and to the secretive desert community? AI is now analyzing the Gospel of Matthew. Early results suggest it may have been written by 2 different people, and one of them was likely an actual eyewitness to the life of Christ. For now, one thing is certain: artificial intelligence hasn't destroyed the mystery of the Bible. It has made it even more amazing. Behind the sacred lines stand real people with hopes, fears, and dreams. And that makes the ancient text not less holy, but more human. Eleazar in his house in Babylon, Shaul in the royal palace of Jerusalem, Abner with his students in a scriptorium. Each of them thought they were writing for their own time, but their words outlived empires that once seemed eternal. Babylon fell, Rome collapsed, but their book still changes lives today. And now, thanks to artificial intelligence, we have finally heard their names. And here's what's especially intriguing. Next month, the team plans to apply the algorithm to the Quran. What will AI find there? Will the results be just as shocking? Then they'll move on to Buddhist texts, ancient Hindu scriptures, even the myths and legends of different civilizations. The story of the Bible turned out to be even more incredible than we imagined. And who knows what other secrets AI will uncover as it digs into the past? One thing is certain. This is only the beginning of an extraordinary journey into the world of ancient texts, a world where every word carries the memory of people who lived thousands of years ago. A world where artificial intelligence becomes an archaeologist of the human soul, and the most sensational discoveries are still ahead.